I wanted to talk about Saint Monica. Her feast day was just like a week ago, and she's really a wonderful saint. I learned a lot about her just preparing to talk about her. And I'll just give you a quick summary of her life. I don't know if you can see all this. Saint Monica, the model Catholic mom. When they say Catholic, they mean universal or Orthodox. Or the Catholic Church really admires Augustine and Saint Augustine. Saint Monica was born into a Christian family in Tunisia in the early part of the 4th century. So she was born kind of right after Christianity was legalized. So right before she was born, Christians were persecuted, and after that, it was legalized. Not long after Emperor Constantine first legalized Christianity, there it is, her husband, Parisius, was a pagan. Their son, Augustine, proved to be quite a challenge, as passed through his adolescence and adult years, living with his girlfriend and getting involved in an exotic cult. All throughout, Monica labored in prayer for his conversion. I hit the record. Her prayers were finally answered, and her son became a bishop and one of the greatest teachers in the history of the church. And I'll add that he's not just a teacher in the church, he's one of what we call them doctors of the church, of the Western church. He's one of the 5 doctors, so it's a very prestigious thing. His writings, he's prolific. I mean, he's written so much stuff. So, you know, we know a lot about the story of Saint Monica with Augustine. And I want to read some quotes from this book that I read about Saint Monica. It's really a great book. Okay, I'll read you the quote now. So it's a book by someone named Frances Alice Forbes. She says, "This book is above all things the story of a mother, but it is also the story of a noble woman, a woman who is truly great for the reason that she never sought to be so, because she understood the sphere in which a woman's work in the world must usually lie, and led her life truly among the lines that God has laid down for her, because she suffered bravely, forgot herself for others, and remained faithful to her noble ideals. She ruled as a great queen among those who her life was cast. Her influence was great and far-reaching, but she herself was the last to suspect it, the last to desire it, and that was perhaps the secret of her greatness. The type is rare in the present day, but thank God there are Monicas still in the world, and if there were more, the world would be a better place." It's such an amazing thing that she wrote about Saint Monica. Oh, this is the icon that we got. This is Emma Carlos visiting us in Egypt. Okay. So I wanna pick one verse, and this verse is kind of the theme to Saint Monica's life. You know, a lot of times we hear about her and Augustine, and so every time we talk about Monica, we talk about that's Augustine's mom. But I kind of don't want to talk about Augustine. I want to just talk about Saint Monica herself, and I want to talk about her marriage, and mostly about her mother-in-law. Yeah, it's kind of like that. Just like we're all laughing? Yeah, just like that. Okay. So this is the verse that reminds me of I think if you had to pick one verse that captured Saint Monica, that would be this. "Likewise, you wives, be submissive to your husbands, so that some, that they do not obey the word, may be won without a word by the behavior of their wives. When they see your reverent and chaste behavior, let not yours be the outward adorning with braiding of hair, decoration of gold, and wearing of robes, but let it be the hidden person of the heart, with the imperishable jewel of a gentle and quiet spirit, which in God's sight is very precious." Right, so it's a beautiful, beautiful verse about what Saint Monica did, and I believe how she changed her husband and her son. So the story of her marriage. So a lot of times we don't talk about Saint Monica's marriage. We talk about the son, Augustine, obviously the saint. But I wanted to read you this quote from Saint Nikon. It says, "There never was and never will be a place on earth free from sorrows. The only sorrowless place possible is the heart, when the Lord is present there. It's a very sobering statement. There never was and never will be a place on earth that's free from sorrow. And this is a saint, a very joyful man, a Christian man, saying these words. And sometimes I think we chase after this ideal. We think, Christianity and the church and God, he's supposed to make life good for us. He's supposed to make life easy for us, make it less sorrowful. And yet you have saints like Monica, who I'm going to talk to you about here in a second, who just epitomize what a saint is. And there was lots of sorrow in Monica's life, lots of pain in Monica's life, day by day, minute by minute. And the pain was the kind that really cuts into the heart. Right? And so what he's basically saying in this quote is the only place there's no sorrow is in the heart. And the only time there's no sorrow in the heart is when God is in the heart. That's the only place. That's the only place you can go, that you can hide, if you will, from the sorrows of the world. So let's talk about her mother-in-law. I want to read you this great quote. A saint was asked, "What is anger?" He gave a beautiful answer. It is punishment we give to ourselves for someone else's mistake. So that's what anger is. It's how we punish ourselves when someone else makes a mistake. Anger is simply holding on to a resentment that someone else screwed up. So I'll read you about her mother-in-law. When Monica was 20 years old, when Monica was 20 years old, I'm just going to read to you from this book. When Monica was 22 years old, her parents gave her in marriage to a citizen of Tunisia called Patricius. He held a good position in the town, for he belonged to a family which, though was very poor, was noble. Monica knew little of her future husband, just that he was nearly twice her age and a pagan. And it was the custom for parents to arrange all such matters, and she had only to obey. There was a lot of surprise felt by the people in the town that such a good Christian should choose a pagan husband for their beautiful daughter, especially since Patricius was well known for his violent temper, even among his own associates. She had her girlish ideals of love and marriage. She had dreamt of a strong arm on which she could lean, of a heart and soul that would be at one with her in all that was dear, of 2 lives spent together in God's love and service. And now it seemed that it was she who would have to be strong for both of them, to strive and to suffer, to bring her husband's soul out of darkness into the light of truth. She finally came to grips with her destiny, and late one night, after spending much time at the church, kneeling at her bedside, she laid the ideals of her girlhood at the feet of him who lets no sacrifice, however small, go unrewarded. She would be true to this new trust, she resolved, whatever the cost. So she had this ideal of this husband that was going to serve with her and love her and be great. And she was 22 and she was very young. And she marries this guy who's double her age, and he's a pagan. And it's very surprising that her parents would give her to a pagan. In fact, many people in the city were shocked that they did this, and especially since he didn't have any money. And at one point, she finally relented. After going to church, kneeling at her bedside, she said, "That's it. I'm going to give up this dream, and I'm going to follow through whatever the cost. I'm going to love this man, whatever the cost." And she succumbed to this predicament that she finds herself in. And I kind of want to point to, this is how saints are made. Saints aren't born. Saints don't just appear. They don't just come down from heaven because they're given magical powers. Saints' lives generally suck. And it starts like this. You marry a guy who is no good. And now you've got to deal with it, and you're 22. And you got to deal with it for 60 years, right? And you know this. Things certainly did not go well for the young bride's happiness. Patricius lived with his mother, a woman of strong passion like himself. So now she had to walk into not just this guy's house, but her mother-in-law who lived with him. And he didn't get rid of his mother-in-law. They all stayed together, and she was stronger than he was and more evil than he was. And so a woman of strong passion like himself and devoted to her son. She was very jealous, bitterly jealous of the young girl who had stolen his affection. So she hated Monica and made up her mind to dislike her. Of course, the slaves of the household followed her lead, and they tried to please her by inventing stories against Monica. So once the slaves figured out that the mom didn't like Monica, they would just start making up stuff about Monica. And of course, the mom would believe it because the mom hated Monica and wanted to believe anything evil about Monica. And so as these slaves concocted story, the mother more and more disliked Monica. Patricius, the husband, who loved his young wife with only the kind of love of which he was capable. And I'll say that only kind of love he's capable. He's a pagan. You know, in their ceremonies, they do lots of, all kinds of stuff. Let's just say adulterous fornication. And that's what he knew, and that's how he loved her. He had nothing in common with her. He had no clue to why she did what she did. He had neither reverence nor respect for women in general. Indeed, most of the women of his acquaintances and most of the women that he knew were deserving of neither respect or reverence. And he had chosen Monica because she was pretty, for her beauty, much as he would have chosen a horse or a dog. So the only reason he picked her is because she was pretty. And he didn't respect her, he didn't know her, he didn't admire her, nothing. He thought her ways and ideas were strange. She took a kind interest in the slaves as if they had been of her own flesh and blood. And she would even intercede to spare them a beating. So whenever the slaves were get to beating, she would jump in and stop them. She liked the poor and would gather the dirty and unpleasant people about her, going so far as to even wash and dress their sores. Patricius, her husband, did not share her attraction and objected strongly to such actions. But Monica pleaded so humbly and so sweetly that he gave her her way and let her do what seemed to cause her so much pleasure. And he used to say, and I quote, "There was no accounting for tastes," he would remark. She would spend hours in the church praying with her great eyes fixed on the altar. True, and this is important, she was never there at the church at any time where she was likely to be missed by her husband. And never was she so full of tender affection for him as when she came home. But still, it was a strange way of spending one's time. So even when she went to church for hours and hours, she never did it when he would miss her. And sometimes this is important because sometimes we can use church as an excuse. We can use church, I'm going to church. And you're not really going to church. You're using it to get away from a spouse, or you're using it to, every once in a while you hear about, someone will say, I'm going to go take a quiet time, and I'm just going to lock myself in the room for a few hours, and I'm going to take quiet time. The mom's cooking and doing dishes and dealing with the kids, and the dad's like, I'm just going to go take some quiet time right now and go in my room and pray. Obviously, that's not okay. Right? So even when she spent time in church, she didn't use it in that way. And then the interesting thing is when he would come home, when she had been at church, she would overwhelmingly greet him with joy and humility. And this is really important because the church sometimes becomes for us a destination. Like, the thing to do is go to church, right? The church is the thing that we're supposed to end up at. As long as we go to the church, we've somehow accomplished something. And that's not the way the saints live with the church. The church is a well. You don't just sit at the well. You don't just hang out around the well. You go to the well and you drink. You take some water in a bucket, and then you leave. And you go back home. Right? And the church being that well is where we go and we drink and we absorb the light of Christ, and then we leave and we go become light elsewhere. Right? We become a light to the world, a light to our husband, a light to our families, a light to our workplace, a light to our schools, wherever we are. And that's the way the church has to be used. We go, we absorb, and then we give off the light. Right? Not just go as a destination. She would go be filled and then go use it as strength to deal with her husband. When Patricius, her husband, was in one of his violent tempers, shouting, abusing, and even striking everyone who came in his way, so he was a very violent man, she would look at him with gentle eyes that showed neither fear nor anger. She never answered him sharply, even though his rude words wounded her cruelly. He had once raised his hand to strike her, but he had not dared. Something, he did not know what, held him back. So he never actually struck her, but he struck everybody else. Later, when his anger had subsided, and he was perhaps a little ashamed of his violence, she would meet him with an affectionate smile, forgiving and forgetting everything. She rarely explained her conduct. She never justified her actions. She never said, I said this because of that, and I did this because of that. She would just forgive and forget and love. More often, she said nothing at all, knowing that actions speak more loudly than words. As her greatest biographer says of her, she spoke little, preached not at all, loved much, and prayed unceasingly. Right? So I'll say that one more time. She spoke little, preached not at all, loved much, and prayed unceasingly. And that becomes really the ideal of her role, of an ideal person in life. And I wonder if she had given a lot of sermons to her husband and told him off and told him what he's doing wrong and told him what the Christians believe, whether or not he would have even converted, whether or not he would have even wanted to convert. But rather it was her quiet model of forgiving and forgetting consistently, even though he had been in a rage and in a temper and in anger, that eventually converted him. When the young wives would gather together, married like herself to pagans, they'd all complain. You know, all the wives would get together and they'd complain about the insults and the beatings that they had gotten, and even the blows they had to bear. So Monica would say, "Are you sure your own tongue is not to blame?" But then she would laugh. But she was kind of giving them a little bit of a hint. She would ask them laughingly, and then with ready sympathy would do all she could to help and comfort and advise. They would ask her secret. They would say, "Monica, what's your secret? How come your husband doesn't beat you?" For everyone knew that in spite of the violence of Patricius's temper, he treated her with something that almost approached respect. And then she would tell them, be patient and love and pray. Meet harshness with gentleness. Meet abuse with silence. And when they sometimes answered that it would seem weak to knock under in such a fashion, Monica would say to them, "Do you think more strength is needed to speak or to be silent when you're provoked?" Because they would say it's weak for us to be quiet. And she would say, "What do you think takes more strength? To speak or to be silent when provoked? And which is easier, to smile or to sulk when insulted?" Many homes were happier because of this, for Monica had a particular gift for making peace. So not only did she make peace in her house, she made peace in other people's houses. So it turns out that this bad thing, and I'm going to put bad in quotes, strengthened her, and not only strengthened her, she shared that strength with others. So God planted this seed of pain inside her, and that seed sprouted forth fruit and gave comfort to other people in pain. And so you wonder, why was that seed planted? Was it Monica's role in that time, in that period, in that village, to save so many other marriages because of her own pain? To the outside world, Patricia's young wife seemed content and happy. They didn't even know that she was upset. They didn't even know she was abused. She managed her affairs well, people said, and no one but God knew of the suffering and the secret that was inside her. So despite having this husband and the light, we haven't even gotten Augustine yet and all the turmoil he caused her life. This is just her husband, and we haven't gotten to the mother-in-law yet. No one had any idea that she was even suffering. So the question is this being fake? Is she protecting? Is she just pretending? Or is she protecting and honoring her husband? Could she have smeared his reputation? Sure. Could she have went and told everyone about the stuff he does? Sure. But she wanted to honor him, and she felt like he deserved that protection. And the question is, does he deserve that protection? No, he doesn't. He's a jerk. He didn't deserve the protection. But she gave it to him anyway. And then it makes me think about my life with God and whether or not I deserve what God gives me. And the answer is no. But he gives anyway. Do we deserve the salvation? Do we deserve what God did for us? No. But he gives anyway. So Monica becomes this model of Christ that gives to someone who doesn't deserve, to protect him and honor him and protect his name and cover him up from the village so that no one knows what he's really like. And he doesn't even deserve it. With Monica, he was always at his best. But he grew tired of being at his best. Every once in a while, it was so much easier to be at his worst. He gradually began to seek distractions among his old pagan companions in his old sinful pleasures. Everyone see what I'm saying? He started leaving and going back to his old pagan friends, old pagan rituals, old pagan acquaintances, both male and female, and seeking pleasure in sinful ways. The whole town found out, and the whole town began to talk about his neglect of his beautiful young wife. How could he do that? Because everyone saw him at the pagan orgy. Monica suffered cruelly, but in silence. When he was at home, which was seldom, she was serene and gentle as usual. She never reproached him and treated him with the same tender deference as of old. So even after he started going to these pagan things, she still greeted him with a smile, despite the fact that everyone in the village knew what was happening. She was humiliated and embarrassed. When he came home, she would offer him more charm and a smile. Maybe this is where the church gets the advice to the brides, right? A smile in his face. We say this at every wedding, and everyone laughs. And maybe this is where the advice comes from, because this was Monica's secret, never frowning in his face. And again, we haven't gotten to Augustine yet. All right, so let's talk about her mother-in-law. Her mother-in-law treated her with suspicion and dislike. You see all the slaves constantly inventing fresh stories against her over and over again, misrepresented all her actions to the mother-in-law. Here is what's amazing. From the outside, Monica did not even seem to notice unkindness, repaying the many insults she received with little services, tactfully rendered. But of course, she felt it all deeply. So she would be insulted by both the slaves and the mother-in-law. And it says here, she did not seem to even notice it. Like it just went right over her. But of course, she heard it and she felt it. She would say to herself, "They do not know," and pray for them even more, offering her suffering for these poor souls who were so far from the peace of Christ. How was the light to come to them if not through her? How could they learn to love God and Christ unless they learned to love his servants and see God in them? The revelation must come through her, she thought. If it was to come at all, thou in me, O God. She would pray and draw strength and courage at his feet for the daily suffering. This is the passing of her mother-in-law. Monica, it is true, was a saint, but a saint in the making. Saints are not born ready-made. Holiness is a beautiful thing that is built up stone by stone, not brought into being by the touch of the enchanter's wand. During the years that had passed since Patricius had brought his young wife to his mother's house, she would have been the first to confess how far she had fallen short of the ideal she had set herself to attain. So she never felt that she was a saint, which is the only feeling a saint can have. Not because they're humble, but because that's the reality. Because I'm sure for every story I'm telling you here about what Saint Monica did, there may be a couple where she didn't do that. There may be a couple of times when he said something and she flew off the handle and she got upset and she got angry and she felt it deeply. And yet there had been ceaseless effort, ceaseless prayer, unwearying love and patience. Outwardly, all seemed as usual, but the hidden force had been doing its work in secret, as it always does. So her response to evil was good. But yet God's response to evil was working within the people who were doing the evil. The mother of Patricius was growing old. She was neither so active nor so strong as she had been. What had used to be easy for her was becoming difficult. It hurt her independent spirit to be obliged to ask help of others. She didn't like to ask for help. Monica, reading her heart as only the selfless can, saw this and understood. At every moment, the older woman would find that some little service had been done by unseen hands. Some little thoughtful act had made things easier for the tired old limbs. There was someone who seemed to know and understand what the mother-in-law wanted almost before she did herself. So as she got older and she was weaker and her independent spirit was hurt, Monica would start to position little things in the house so that it would be easier for this mother-in-law to get around to do certain things, and never mention who it was. And she would think ahead of what the mother-in-law would need in the future and do it for her. Who could it be? The mother-in-law thought about it. Not the slaves, certainly. They did their duty for fear of being beaten, but that was all. Not Patricius, the husband, either. It was not his way. He never thought of such things. It could therefore be no one but Monica. Again, how had Monica repaid the mother for her unkindness? With never-failing charity and sweetness, with gentle respect and deference to her wishes. Never trying to assert herself, never appealing to her husband to give her the place of which right belonged to her. She had been content to be treated as the last in the house. So something didn't make sense to the mother-in-law. She sent for the slaves. She questioned them sharply as to the stories that they had told her about Monica. They had been saying these stories for years. They faltered. They contradicted one another. They contradicted each other. They contradicted themselves. In the end, they confessed that they had lied and made up all these stories about Monica. The hidden forces had been working there as well in the slaves. Monica's kindness, her sympathy with their joys and sorrows, to them, something strange and new had already touched their hearts, the slaves' hearts. More than once, they had been sorry for ever having spoken evil against her, and they felt ashamed in her presence. So you see what the slaves are kind of stuck with. They don't want to speak well of Monica because they know the mother-in-law hates her. So if they say anything good, the mother-in-law will turn on them, and they don't want to get beat. So they say bad things about Monica to the mother-in-law, make up stuff, because that kind of makes the mother-in-law happy. But yet Monica is treating them, knowing what they're doing, treating them with respect, tending to their wounds, interceding so they don't get beat, loving with them, and sharing in their happiness, their joys, and their sorrows. And they're conflicted. They want to continue the lies because it makes the mother-in-law happy, but they keep seeing Monica, and they keep seeing how wonderful she is. And so God had been working in them as well. The mother-in-law then punished the slaves that had lied and invented stories about Monica. Justice had been done on the slaves. The mother of Patricius sought out her daughter-in-law, told her frankly that she had been in the wrong. She apologized and asked for Monica's forgiveness. Monica clasped the old woman in her arms and refused to listen. From that moment, they were the truest of friends. I'll repeat that sentence one more time. Monica clasped the old woman in her arms and refused to listen. She wouldn't even accept her apologies. After years and years of abuse and torment, she wouldn't even accept her apology. The mother then wanted to know, what's the secret of Monica's peace? So she asked her, and Monica answered. It was a message of new life, of hope beyond the grave, of joy, of peace. The mother begged to be received as a catechumen. Look at the effect. The mother begged to be received as a catechumen. It was not long before she knelt at Monica's side before the altar to be signed with the cross of Christ, with the Holy Myroon, the joyous first fruits of seed. One by one, the slaves followed the mother's example. One by one, hungry for the message that brought such peace and light to suffering and weary souls. They all became Christian and asked Monica to pray for them and help them to become Christians. The whole household was Christian now. The mother-in-law, Monica, and the slaves, with the exception of Patricius, her husband. And even he was growing gentle daily, more thoughtful. This mysterious force was working on him as well. His love for Monica was more reverent. His eyes were opening slowly to the beauty of this spiritual woman. His mother was failing fast. the end could not be far off, Monica devoted herself entirely, her heart and soul, to this old woman. The woman clung to her with tender affection and was never happy in Monica's absence. So this mother-in-law never wanted to be without Monica as she was dying. Eventually, she passed in peace with Monica by her side, showing her love until the very end. Just an amazing story of what she went through. Do we have time? I think we have some more time. We'll talk about Patricia's conversion. So I'll read you this quote from Abu Nabshoy Kamil. He says, "The saints are not humans without sin. They are humans who have struggled against sin." And it's just a very important point that sometimes we think these saints just kind of fall from the sky, that it isn't a struggle, that they don't fall, that they don't continually stumble and make mistakes. But St. Monica shows us that with perseverance and love, eventually we get through it. Patricius, her husband, now often prayed with Monica. He understood at last. Every day, the seed of a noble nature that had lain so long dormant were gaining strength and life. Every day, his soul was opening more and more to the understanding of spiritual things, while Monica watched the transformation with a heart that overflowed with gratitude and love. She watched him convert with a heart that overflowed with gratitude and love. The sorrows of the past were all forgotten in the joy of the present. Sorry. Nice, sweet. His mother had already shown him the joys of a Christian deathbed. She had passed away smiling, with their hands in hers and the name of Jesus on her lips. Well, you know how the story ends. So Patricius is eventually converted. He has a short life left. He has 1 year left. He asks Monica to help him, pray for him, to prepare for baptism, which he desired to receive as soon as possible. With the simplicity and trustfulness of a child, he looked to her for gratitude and did all that she desired. The ceremony over, he turned to his wife and smiled. A wonderful peace possessed him. Sorry, I'm not going to be able to continue. Any questions? عايز Augustine عشان your grandson.
No, because the 20 years.
Okay. All right, we'll talk about Augustine. With Augustine. If you look on this icon, on the side of the icon, on the scroll, this is what St. Ambrose said to her. If you can read it, it says, "The son of these tears will never perish." So with the icon, she's crying for her son. And St. Ambrose said to her to encourage her, "The son of these tears will never perish." So I won't talk too much about Augustine. Augustine's a whole other story. But here's what she said to him. After Augustine converted and became a Christian, she said, "Son, as far as I'm concerned, nothing in this life now gives me any pleasure. I do not know why I am still here, since I have no further hopes in this world. I did have one reason for wanting to live a little longer, to see you become a Catholic Christian before I died. God has lavished his gifts on me in that respect, for I know that you have renounced earthly happiness to be his servant. So what am I still doing here?" So this was her attitude. The only reason I'm even alive is to see you die as a Christian, to see you become a Christian. And now that I've seen you become a Christian, I don't really have a purpose. And I imagine, as parents, how we are different from that response. What do we look for our children? What do we want from our children? Success, money, marriage, children, grandchildren, career, house, right? And look at her response. I only have one reason for living, to see you become a Christian. And now I've seen you become a Christian. There's really nothing left for me to see. I don't really know why God wants me on this earth still. It's amazing. And her last wish to her son, if you see it on the scroll, only this I ask of you, remember me at the altar of God. So when she found out he became a priest, she told him, remember me at the altar of God. No tears, no nothing, no sadness over my passing. Just remember me continuously. I think that's it. Any questions, comments? Glory be to God forever. Amen. Let's stand and pray real quick. Make us worthy to say with all thanksgiving, Our Father who art in heaven,